Long before Denmark had its own coins, the Vikings had a deep appreciation for treasure. They were skilled traders and fearsome raiders, traveling across the seas to distant lands. From these journeys, they brought back a wealth of riches, but it was silver that they valued most highly. This gleaming metal became their standard for trade and wealth. They did not have coins as we know them today. Instead, they used pieces of silver, often cut from jewelry, ornaments, or foreign coins. This was known as hacksilver. A merchant would weigh the silver on a small scale to determine its value, making every transaction a careful measurement of worth. It was a simple yet effective system for a world on the move. The coins that did reach Danish shores came from far and wide. Intricate silver dirhams from the Arab caliphates, bearing elegant Kufic script, were particularly prized. These coins traveled thousands of miles along ancient trade routes, a testament to the vast network of connections the Vikings maintained. Coins from the Byzantine Empire and from various parts of Western Europe also found their way into Viking hoards. These foreign coins were not just used for their silver content. Their designs often inspired the first Danish craftsmen, who began to imitate them. These early copies, known as ciadas, were among the very first coins made in what would become Denmark, a quiet beginning for a national currency. The true birth of a Danish national coinage, however, can be traced to the great Viking kings of the late 10th century. One of the first was Harald Bluetooth, a king famous for uniting Denmark and introducing Christianity. He understood that having his own coins was a powerful symbol of his authority. The coins he issued were simple, featuring a cross on one side, a clear sign of his new faith and his connection to the wider Christian world of Europe. These coins were not just money, they were a message, a declaration that Denmark was now a unified and modern kingdom, with a king powerful enough to mint his own currency and control its value. Following Harald, his son, Sweyn Forkbeard, continued and expanded the minting of Danish coins. Sweyn was a formidable king who famously conquered England. His coins, known as pennies, were struck in both Denmark and England. This was a hugely significant step. It showed that the Danish king's power was not limited to his homeland. His currency was accepted and produced in one of the richest kingdoms in Europe. For the first time, a Danish coin was an international currency, a symbol of an empire that stretched across the North Sea. This marked the moment when Danish coinage truly stepped onto the world stage, establishing a legacy that would continue for over 1,000 years. As the Viking Age gave way to the Middle Ages, Denmark's society became more settled and organized. The simple silver pennies of the past began to evolve into a more complex system of money. For centuries, the penning remained the most common coin. However, its silver content and quality could change dramatically from one king to the next. Some rulers would issue good, heavy coins with high silver content, which helped trade and brought prosperity. Others, in times of trouble or greed, would debase the currency, mixing the silver with cheaper metals like copper. This often led to confusion and mistrust, as people had to constantly check the quality of the coins they were given. To address this confusion and the growing needs of a more complex economy, new types of coins were introduced. Around the 14th century, a small silver coin called the hvid appeared. Its name means white, a reference to its bright silvery appearance. The hvid was worth less than the older pennies, making it useful for smaller everyday purchases. Instead of trading a whole sheep for a valuable coin, a farmer could now buy a loaf of bread or a small tool with a single hvid. This made life easier for ordinary people, allowing them to participate more fully in the local economy. It was a sign that trade was no longer just for the wealthy, but was becoming a part of daily life for everyone. Another important coin that emerged during this period was the skilling. The skilling was a larger and more valuable coin than the hvid, and it became a key part of the Danish monetary system for hundreds of years. Its introduction helped to create a more structured system of values. Now, there were different coins for different purposes. You might use a hvid for a small purchase at the market, but you would use a skilling for paying taxes or buying more expensive goods. This hierarchy of coins, from the small hvid to the larger skilling, made accounting and trade much more efficient. It was a system that reflected a more organized and stable society. The medieval period was a time of great change for Danish money. The king's control over the mints grew stronger, and the variety of coins expanded to meet the demands of a growing population and economy. From the simple penning, the system grew to include the useful hvid and the steadfast skilling. Each new coin tells a story of how Denmark was changing, becoming a more connected and commercially active kingdom. The money in a person's pouch was no longer just a piece of silver. It was part of a national system, a tool that helped build the foundations of the modern Danish state and its economy. As Denmark entered the early modern period from the 16th century onwards, its coinage system underwent another major transformation. The most important coin of this era was the rigsdaler. This was a large, impressive silver coin, modeled on the German thaler, which was the international currency of its time. The rigsdaler was the backbone of the Danish economy for nearly 300 years. It was a coin of substance, trusted across northern Europe, and it symbolized the power and prestige of the Danish crown. When a Danish merchant traveled to Hamburg or Amsterdam, the rigsdaler was a coin that was recognized and accepted, making international trade smoother than ever before. The monetary system built around the rigsdaler was quite complex. It was not a simple decimal system like we have today. Instead, one rigsdaler was divided into a set number of smaller units, usually 96 skillings. This meant that calculations could be quite complicated. Imagine having to work out prices based on a system of 96 parts. This system, however, was common across Europe at the time. Below the skilling, there were even smaller copper coins for minor purchases. This created a rich and varied landscape of currency, with large silver dalers for significant transactions, and humble copper skillings for the daily needs of the common people. The value of the rigsdaler was not always stable. Kings often needed vast sums of money to fund wars, build magnificent castles, or maintain a lavish court. A tempting way to raise funds was to tamper with the currency. They could issue a new type of rigsdaler called a current, which looked similar to the old one but contained less silver. This meant the king could produce more coins from the same amount of precious metal. While this provided a short-term solution to the king's financial problems, it created long-term uncertainty for the people. The value of money could change unexpectedly, making it difficult to save or plan for the future. Despite these fluctuations, the rigsdaler defined an entire epoch of Danish history. It was the currency of Denmark's age of absolutism, a time when the king held supreme power. The coins themselves were works of art, often bearing a detailed portrait of the reigning monarch on one side and the royal coat of arms on the other. Every coin was a miniature proclamation of the king's authority, a piece of royal propaganda that passed through the hands of thousands of his subjects. The era of the rigsdaler was a time of both great power and great instability, and the coins of the period perfectly reflect this story of royal ambition and economic reality. The early 19th century was a time of immense turmoil for Denmark. The kingdom found itself on the losing side of the Napoleonic Wars. The conflict was devastating for the Danish economy. The British Navy destroyed the Danish fleet and blockaded its trade routes. To finance the war effort, the government resorted to printing vast quantities of paper money with nothing to back it up. This led to hyperinflation. The value of the currency plummeted, and people's life savings became worthless almost overnight. By 1813, the situation was so dire that the state was forced to declare bankruptcy. It was a national catastrophe, a moment of profound crisis that shook the kingdom to its core. In the aftermath of this collapse, a radical solution was needed to restore faith in the nation's money. The old system was broken beyond repair. The solution came in 1813 with a major currency reform. A new coin, the rigsdaler, was introduced to replace the worthless old currency. This was not just a name change, it was a complete reset of the financial system. The exchange rate was punishing, with large amounts of old money being worth only a small amount of the new. It was a painful but necessary step to stabilize the economy and begin the slow process of rebuilding trust. The rigsdaler was a promise of a fresh start. The most crucial part of this reform was the creation of a new independent institution to manage the currency. In 1818, the Danmarks Nationalbanken, or the National Bank of Denmark, was founded. Its primary mission was to ensure the stability of the new rigsdaler and to prevent the kind of financial mismanagement that had led to the 1813 bankruptcy. The bank was given the sole right to issue currency, taking this power away from the government. This separation was vital. It meant that politicians could no longer simply print money to solve their problems. The bank would act as a guardian of the currency's value, a role it continues to fulfill to this day. The establishment of the National Bank and the introduction of the rigsdaler marked a turning point in Danish history. It laid the foundation for a modern, stable financial system. For the first time, the country's money was managed not by the whims of a king or the short-term needs of a government, but by an independent institution focused on long-term stability. The coins issued by the new bank were made with reliable amounts of silver, slowly rebuilding the confidence of the people and of international trading partners. The crisis of 1813 was a painful lesson, but it led to reforms that would serve Denmark well for the next 2 centuries. Section 5. The krone arrives. A new era of money. By the late 19th century, the world was changing rapidly, you know? The Industrial Revolution was transforming economies, and countries were really seeking closer economic ties. The old, complicated currency systems like the rigsdaler with its 96 skillings were seen as outdated and inefficient. A new, simpler system was needed. In 1873, Denmark decided to make a bold move. It abandoned the rigsdaler and introduced a brand new currency, the krone. The name krone means crown, which is, well, a fitting name for a royal kingdom's currency. The most important change was that the krone was part of a decimal system. 1 krone was divided into 100 ore. This made calculations far easier and brought Denmark in line with modern international practice. This change was not made in isolation. Denmark joined with Sweden and Norway to form the Scandinavian Monetary Union in 1873 and 1875. This was a remarkable agreement. The 3 countries agreed that their new kroner would have the same value and would be freely accepted in all 3 nations. A Danish krone was worth 1 Swedish krona and 1 Norwegian krone. This meant that a person could travel from Copenhagen to Stockholm or Oslo and use their Danish coins as if they were at home. The Union created a large, stable economic region and fostered close ties between the Scandinavian neighbors. It was a pioneering example of international monetary cooperation. The new krone was backed by a gold standard. This meant that the value of the krone was legally fixed to a certain amount of gold held by the national bank. Anyone could, in theory, go to the bank and exchange their krone banknotes for a specific quantity of pure gold. This provided a powerful guarantee of the currency's value and stability. It created tremendous confidence both at home and abroad. The gold standard was the bedrock of the international financial system at the time, and by adopting it, Denmark signaled that its currency was as solid and reliable as any in the world. This stability helped to attract investment and fuel economic growth. The introduction of the krone and ore system was more than just a monetary reform, it was a symbol of Denmark's entry into the modern industrial age. The new coins were practical, logical, and tied to an international standard of value. The Scandinavian Monetary Union represented a new spirit of cooperation and shared progress. This system, established almost 150 years ago, proved to be incredibly successful and resilient. While the monetary union and the gold standard would eventually come to an end, the krone and ore decimal system that was born in this era remains the foundation of Denmark's currency to this very day. The 20th century brought, well, some truly unprecedented challenges that profoundly affected Denmark's coinage. The First World War, from 1914 to 1918, put immense strain on the Scandinavian Monetary Union and the gold standard. As countries diverted resources to the war effort, the free movement of gold between them was suspended. The link between the krone and a fixed amount of gold was broken, and after the war, it was never fully restored in quite the same way. This really marked the end of an era of certainty. Currency values began to float more freely, and the close monetary bond between the Scandinavian countries dissolved. The krone was now, for the first time, on its own. The economic turmoil of the war and the Great Depression that followed led to significant changes in the coins themselves. Precious metals like gold, silver, and even bronze became scarce, or just too expensive to use for coinage. The National Bank had to find cheaper alternatives. Coins that had once been made of silver were now struck in alloys like cupronickel, and bronze coins were replaced with ones made of zinc or iron. These emergency coins were often lighter and less durable, a physical reminder, really, of the difficult economic times the country was enduring. They were a necessity to keep the economy functioning when traditional materials were simply unavailable. The Second World War brought even more disruption. During the German occupation of Denmark from 1940 to 1945, shortages became severe. The mint had to be creative to produce the coins people needed for daily life. Zinc and aluminum became the standard metals for coinage. These coins felt different in the hand. They were much lighter than their pre-war counterparts. and the designs were often simplified as well. These wartime coins tell a story of resilience and adaptation in the face of occupation and scarcity. They were a small but constant part of life for Danes living through one of the darkest periods in their history. After the wars, as prosperity returned, the coinage gradually changed again. However, some of the wartime changes became permanent. Silver never returned for circulating coins, and new, more durable and cost-effective alloys became the norm. Another significant trend was the gradual disappearance of the smallest coins. As inflation slowly eroded the value of money over the decades, the 1-ore and 2-ore coins became practically worthless. They cost more to produce than their face value, so they were eventually taken out of circulation. This process continued throughout the late 20th century, as the Danish currency system adapted to a new economic reality. By the late 1980s, it was pretty clear that Denmark's coinage needed a major update. The existing coins had been in use for many years, and a more modern and user-friendly system was required. Between 1989 and 1993, the National Bank introduced a completely new series of coins, the one we are familiar with today. This was a carefully planned reform, designed to make the coins easily distinguishable for everyone, including those with visual impairments. The new series included the 50-ore coin and the 1, 2, 5, 10, and 20 krone coins. Each coin was given a unique size, weight, and metal color to avoid confusion. The designs of these new coins are, I think, a beautiful blend of tradition and simplicity. The three highest value coins, the 10 and 20 kroner, feature a portrait of the reigning monarch, Queen Margrethe II, continuing a tradition that is centuries old. The lower value coins, the 1, 2, and 5 krone, display the royal crown. A particularly charming detail is found on the reverse side of these three coins. They feature a simple, heart-themed ornament, inspired by designs found in old Danish churches and on coinage from the 1200s. This subtle touch connects the modern coins directly back to Denmark's deep medieval history. One of the most distinctive features of the new coins is the hole in the middle of the 1, 2, and 5 krone pieces. This design element is not just for decoration, it serves a very practical purpose. The hole makes these coins instantly recognizable by touch, which is a great help for blind and partially sighted people. It also reduces the amount of metal needed to produce them, making them more cost-effective. This clever design feature actually has its roots in Danish history, as some very early 20th century coins also had holes. It's a perfect example of how the new series combines thoughtful, modern design with echoes of the past. Every Danish coin produced since the reform also carries a tiny, almost hidden detail, the mint mark of the Royal Danish Mint. This mark is a small heart. It signifies that the coin was made in Copenhagen, a tradition that goes back to the 17th century. This small heart is a symbol of the care and quality that goes into making the nation's money. In 2008, another change occurred when the 25-ore coin was withdrawn from circulation, as its value had become too low to be practical. This left the 50-ore coin as the smallest denomination, a final step in modernizing the currency for the 21st century. Beyond the coins used for everyday shopping, the Royal Danish Mint has a long and proud tradition of producing special coins to mark significant events in the life of the nation. These are known as commemorative coins. They are issued to celebrate royal occasions, such as a monarch's birthday, a wedding, or a jubilee marking a long reign. For example, beautiful coins were minted to celebrate Queen Margrethe II's 40th and 50th anniversaries on the throne. These coins are often made of precious metals like silver or gold, and feature elaborate designs. They're not intended for circulation, but are eagerly sought after by collectors and those wishing to own a piece of Danish history. Commemorative coins also honor other important aspects of Danish culture and science. A wonderful series of coins was issued to celebrate the fairy tales of Hans Christian Andersen, with designs featuring the Little Mermaid and the Ugly Duckling. Another series paid tribute to great Danish scientists like Niels Bohr, the father of quantum physics. These coins serve as miniature monuments, reminding the Danish people of their rich cultural heritage and their contributions to the world. They're a way for the nation to celebrate its identity and its heroes, transforming a simple piece of metal into a story of national pride. Denmark's history as a colonial power also left its mark on coinage. For centuries, Denmark held territories in other parts of the world, including the West Indies, now the United States Virgin Islands, Greenland, and the Faroe Islands. These territories often had their own unique coins, issued by Denmark but designed for local use. The Danish West Indies, for example, had a currency system based on the dollar and cent, with coins featuring palm trees and sailing ships reflecting the tropical setting. These colonial coins are a fascinating chapter in the story of Danish money, telling a tale of trade, power, and distant connections across the oceans. Today, Greenland and the Faroe Islands are autonomous territories within the Kingdom of Denmark. While they use Danish kroner for most transactions, they have also issued their own special banknotes, and in the past, their own coins. Faroese banknotes, for instance, feature beautiful designs of local wildlife such as puffins and rams, giving them a distinct local identity. These special currencies are a symbol of the unique status of these territories. They use the same krone, valued equally with the Danish krone, but they express their own culture and heritage through the art on their money. A modern reflection of a long and complex shared history. At the turn of the 21st century, Denmark faced one of the most significant decisions in its monetary history. The European Union was preparing to launch a single currency, the euro, to replace the national currencies of its member states. As a member of the EU, Denmark had the option to join this historic project. Adopting the euro would mean giving up the krone, a currency that had served the nation for over 125 years. It was a choice between deeper European integration and maintaining national monetary independence. The debate was passionate, touching on issues of identity, sovereignty, and economic control. In the year 2000, the Danish people were asked to decide the fate of their currency in a national referendum. The arguments for adopting the euro were strong. Proponents pointed to the economic benefits of a single currency, such as easier trade with other European countries and the elimination of currency exchange costs. They argued that joining the euro would give Denmark a seat at the table where major European economic decisions were made. For many, it seemed like the logical next step for a modern, trade-dependent nation at the heart of Europe. It promised a future of closer cooperation and shared prosperity within the Eurozone. However, the arguments for keeping the krone were equally powerful and in the end, ultimately proved more persuasive to the Danish public. Opponents of the euro raised concerns about losing control over the country's economic policy. By keeping the krone, the Danish National Bank could set its own interest rates to manage the national economy, a tool that would be lost if they adopted the euro. There was also a strong emotional attachment to the krone. It was seen as a symbol of Danish sovereignty and identity, a part of the nation's heritage. For many Danes, giving up their own currency felt like giving up a piece of what it meant to be Danish. In the end, the Danish people voted no. A majority chose to keep the krone. Denmark negotiated a special opt-out, allowing it to remain in the European Union without adopting the euro. However, to ensure economic stability, the Danish krone is closely linked to the euro through a system called ERM2. This means the krone's value is kept within a very narrow band relative to the euro. So, while Denmark retains its own currency, its monetary policy is closely aligned with that of the Eurozone. The decision of 2000 was a defining moment, a choice to walk a unique path, part of Europe, but with the krone still proudly in its pocket.